WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. Cristela, Guerra.
Daryl.
How are you today?
Oh, I'm fabulous. How are you?
I'm good. I feel like we should be snapping because we're about to...
Yes, and in black turtlenecks.
Yeah, we're about to talk about some poetry. From what I understand, you're a poet. So this is going to be extra fun. So let's get into it. You recently attended the 25th anniversary celebration of the Lizard Lounge.
I did.
For the uninitiated, like me, what is the Lizard Lounge? Tell me about the scene there.
So the Lizard Lounge is in the basement of Cambridge Common, which is a restaurant near Porter Square.
Okay.
It is a part of a sort of larger restaurant group. And I found out about the anniversary because I was writing about a few places that restaurant group had to close because of the pandemic. But the Lizard had reopened last year.
Is that what they call it for short, the Lizard?
Some people do, yeah.
I like that.
Man, if I'm wrong about that, the poets are gonna come after me.
You're gonna hear this. You're gonna hear this in the night coming after you.
It's a poetry jam, and the reason it's unique is because of that word of jam. Like open mics are open mics, and open mics are open to anybody to come forward. Most poetry nights may have a feature where you have like the professionals come through and spit poetry. And the mic is for, folks who are new to it or who want to just share something that's on their mind. But the poetry jam is poetry and music. And it was founded by a jazz musician named Jeff Robinson and his trio, the Jeff Robinson Trio, in 1998.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Tell me about them.
So they have a kind of interesting story about how they all met in the 90s around like this specific festival in Lowell around Jack Kerouac. And so that had sort of a poetry bent. But essentially, Jeff has a background in theater. He acts, he directs, and he had a teacher once tell him that poetry was essential to good acting and to good theater, that there was a connection between poetry and theater. And in turn, he created a night that had a connection between poetry and music in a way that I think some people would say has like a sort of stereotype, like, like the sort of bongos and like people stringing a bunch of words together. But to me, this poetry jam just feels like, and maybe it was because of the night I went, but it's a packed room. The lights are low. There's carpet. There's a competition first. And people are just sort of like it feels like you're colliding with the words. It feels like you're in motion, the words are in motion, and you're moving in the room together. There's a vibration that happens.
It's like that, it's like that, it's like that, y'all. It's like that, y'all. It's like that, y'all.
And it just so happens that the man who's always in the background, who's playing his saxophone with his jazz trio, with the drummer and the bassist, was at the forefront of that night because it was announced that he was retiring and the whole room was in an uproar.
And this is Jeff Robinson.
This is Jeff Robinson.
Why is he retiring?
He says that he just wants to leave on a high, that he's been doing it for 25 years, but that he has a ton of other ideas, that he wants to spend more time with his kids and his grandkids, that it's time. He wants to leave in his prime.
He wants to leave while it's good. So, Cristela, tell me about Jeff Robinson and his significance to the Boston poetry scene.
Happy to, but I'd love for you to hear him first.
I'm not a poet, but I do love playing music with poets. It's been an eye-opener, and it's changed my music dramatically.
See, the thing about Jeff Robinson is that he doesn't like to talk about himself. But if you were to talk to the poets that I did that night, they would all tell you that he's built an institution, a legacy of uplifting artists in the poetry community just by showing up on Sunday and giving them space. So aside from the fact that he's a playwright and he has written some poems of his own and he's a director and has had a one-man show about Charlie Parker that's gotten rave reviews, he also happens to be this brilliant jazz musician that created this long-lasting evening that people return to as regulars even after like 10 years. So I think, he's one of those like Maybe not known like far and wide, but in the poetry scene, in the poetry community, he is extremely well known. And one of his co-hosts, Joyce Kuhn, said if they had actually made this an announcement of Jeff's retirement, they wouldn't have had enough room. They would have had a line down the street of people trying to pay him homage.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more from Cristela.
Did you kill Marlene Johnson?
I think you're one of the first people to have actually asked.
From WBUR and ZSP Media, this is Beyond All Repair, a new podcast about an unsolved murder that will leave you questioning everything.
Somebody should be in jail for murdering my sister.
A woman who's never been believed.
As long as they think I have done this, then they're not looking for who actually did this.
And that's what makes it a cold case.
No, it's a botched case.
And a search for the truth, once and for all.
Wow, it just gets more interesting.
Beyond All Repair. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
Be careful. You're digging in a place that's been very peaceful for a while.
Do it anyway. Dig.
And we're back. Just tell me about like the art of it and just how does improvised music just change the way one would experience poetry, and talk to me about just what that does to the fabric of art and culture here in Boston, you know?
I haven't been to another poetry slam that had music in the background necessarily. Like, this is the most consistently running one that I know has a jazz trio that isn't playing to like kick off the night and like, you know, end the night. They're playing specifically for the words that come out of your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in that way, as someone who loves spoken word poetry, who's been to the House Slam, who's been to Cantab, who's been to open mics, there is something very special about the way the words mingle with the music. They don't know what they're going to play when you start talking. Daryl, on nights like this, people could come up and talk about lost love, their grandmothers, and whether you're a feature poet that gets paid for this, whether you're up there for the first time, these guys are behind you, backing you up and listening, sometimes with their eyes closed, to see if they can capture the essence and the emotion of what you're saying with their song.
And that's not easy. That sounds pretty hard to try to...
No, that takes a professional.
Yeah, performing poetry is like you're speaking the words artistically, you know, but it's not quite like singing or freestyling. I guess they don't know how these poets are going to perform. It's like high-level improvisation. That sounds pretty impressive.
And they've had all kinds of nights, right? They've had like rappers come through. They've had hip hop. You know, a lot of people sort of do what they will and say what they want. And it's a rare thing to say that a poetry night's been around for 25 years. And I got there at 8 o'clock when they were starting the competition. And I left at 1:30 in the morning because I needed, especially because I kind of knew at the end of the night, Jeff would have some things to say. Mm-hmm. But also he just decided to say it through a saxophone. And you can hear it. You could hear it when he just decided to say it. He introduced his band for the last time. And then at one point in the middle of the night, the woman who won the slam, Jeannie, went upstairs and we had a conversation.
Like, we all do it out of love, you know. The majority of the poets you heard tonight are all well in their 40s. You know, some of us hitting 50. You know, grown kids, some of even grandparents on that mic. But when you get on that mic, on that stage anyway, we defy age, we defy any other thing, any barrier. It's just like, it's church. That's what I call it.
I like that. Does Boston have any other poetry clubs? I mean, how would you describe the poetry scene in Boston and Lizard Lounge's place in it?
So technically, before the pandemic, there were just like a number of teams. And the Lizard would compete against the House Slam, would compete against the Boston Poetry Slam, or the team out of the Cantab, which is in Central Square. Trouble is that a lot of those spots were affected by the pandemic, and some of those teams don't exist anymore. Or they've changed, different people are leading it. So I feel like we're emerging a bit, and I think new mics adapted and they went onto Zoom. There are so many poets in Boston and Cambridge, like folks that have been here since the 90s, who've seen the evolution of poetry, who watched new poets come because they took an English class and they were inspired to write. Like Boston, I don't know if I've ever lived any place that was so thriving in poetry and the different ways and the different kinds of poetry that exists.
Back to the Lizard Lounge, what's going to happen now that Jeff is retiring?
They want people to know that they're there and that actually Jeff plays with Blake Newman, who's the bassist. Blake's taken over the responsibilities that Jeff has had consistently for more than 2 decades, right? Like Jeff is there Sunday to set up everything. There's a drink named after Jeff Robinson. So the legacy that he is leaving behind will absolutely continue and keep going because people love this mic. And so part of this is, it's a celebration of him. It's a celebration of the place. It's to let people know if they need this, it's gonna remain.
Nice. And Cristela, as we mentioned before, you are a poet yourself. What was it like to report on the Lizard Lounge in this 25th anniversary and the retirement of Jeff Robinson?
It's surreal. I'd been to the Lizard a few times early on, and then I found my way to the Cantab, and then I found my way to the Haley House. And I'd seen some of these poets before. I knew some of them. So it was like, I felt very kind of deferential. I felt like I was paying respect. Like I was just kind of watching and taking in this experience because I knew that some of these poets they flew in, they drove in. Like these are people who'd been there consistently before and maybe moved. And so they came back to honor this person that they care so much about. And that felt really important to witness. And then it changed the way I reported because when I came home, I normally would put it into a program to transcribe the whole interview. And this was one of the first stories where I just made a point to listen without transcribing. I wanted to listen to the poems individually to figure out what poetry do I feel like really captured the evening? How do I want the poetry to lead? And so in some ways, I think this poetry jam, which is music and words, made me think, you know what? I need to lead with the sound and I'll write to what the sound tells me. It changed a lot. It changed the way that I report. Also, frankly, National Poetry Month's in April, and so this felt a little bit early. But people have about a month to get ready for that. That's a time, and I wrote about this in the Artery newsletter, where people write a poem a day. And I think I'm going to challenge myself to do that this year.
That's what's up. Well, Cristela, I'm doing my snaps for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us and bring this to us. This is very interesting story. Thank you so much.
No, my pleasure, Daryl. Thank you. I love talking to you guys.
That's WBUR arts and culture reporter Cristela Guerra. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. Hit us up on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok at WBUR The Common. You can also send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.